So I just thought we could talk about a little bit about or catch up with the latest stuff in the ongoing saga of the Donald, and that 45 may well become 47. Or I got my fingers crossed. One of the things I would say straight off the bat is just the most general terms about Trump. Obviously, I favour him over Biden. Obviously. If you just press a button one way or the other, I'm going to be smashing the Trump button until it breaks. But I remember before he became president, back in the 90s and in the early 2000s, he was. I know we've got a lot of big Trump fans, Trump supporters, but it's just, put it this way: I find it odd that he's sort of the great white hope to save all of Western civilization, Donald Trump. If he asked me back in sort of 1997,
Ricky Gervais will save the West,
right? Yeah, it's funny, but he is still good. Obviously, much more of a fan of him than the Democrat Party or anything. And well, one of the things he said first time round, wasn't it, is that he was going to drain the swamp. That was sort of his big promise, wasn't it? Or that he'd lock Hillary up and things. And then when he got into the White House, he didn't really do any of that. Of course, he was very, very deliberately thwarted, I think, from doing a lot of it. But this time round, he is sort of promising to, really drain the swamp. In fact, can we play this clip? Can you just play that? No volume.
Reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption once and for all, and corruption it is. First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively. Second, we will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus, and there are plenty of them. The departments and agencies that have been weaponized will be completely overhauled so that faceless bureaucrats will never again be able to target and persecute conservatives, Christians, or the left's political enemies, which they're doing now at a level that nobody can believe even possible. Third, we will totally reform FISA courts, which are so corrupt that the judges seemingly do not care when they are lied to in warrant applications. So many judges have seen so many applications that they know were wrong, or at least they must have known. They do nothing about it. They're lied to. Fourth, to expose the hoaxes and abuses of power that have been tearing our country apart, we will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify and publish all documents on deep state spying, censorship, and corruption. And there are plenty of them. Fifth, we will launch a major crackdown on government leakers who collude with the fake news to deliberately weave false narratives and to subvert our government and our democracy. When possible, we will press criminal charges. Sixth, we will make every inspector general's office independent and physically separated from the departments they oversee so they do not become the protectors of the deep state. Seventh, I will ask Congress to establish an independent auditing system to continually monitor our intelligence agencies to ensure they are not spying on our citizens or running disinformation campaigns against the American people, or that they are not spying on someone's campaign like they spied on my campaign. Eighth, we will continue the effort launched by the Trump administration to move parts of the sprawling federal bureaucracy to new locations outside the Washington swamp. Just as I moved the Bureau of Land Management to Colorado, as many as 100,000 government positions could be moved out, and I mean immediately, of Washington to places filled with patriots who love America, and they really do love America. Ninth, I will work to ban federal bureaucrats from taking jobs at the companies they deal with and that they regulate. So they deal with these companies and they regulate these companies, and then they want to take jobs from these companies. Doesn't work that way. Such a public display cannot go on, and it's taking place all the time, like with Big Pharma. Finally, I will push a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on members of Congress. This is how I will shatter the deep state and restore government that is controlled by the people and for the people. Thank you very much.
Now, that's a few months old. But nonetheless, if he does even a fraction of that, that's brilliant. There's a few things in there, two or three or four things in there that, people have been killed for less, for promising less. Right?
This is what I wanted to war game out a little bit with you. So I agree with pretty much all of this, particularly the constitutional amendment for term limits, because that will get Nancy Pelosi's crypt keeper looking backside out of office finally. The issue I have, like Schedule F sounds great, 50,000 federal agents that have all been marked for firing. Those people don't just disappear. And as you said, as you've written about before in your fantastic article on the JFK assassination, the intelligence agencies will not go out quietly. There's been a joke on Tim Pool's show of where there might be a reason why a bunch of presidents have promised to do things before, have gotten in office and not done anything. Because as soon as they're sworn in, they sit down. The first meeting at the Oval Office is with the FBI director, and he just slides a photo of JFK across the desk, says nothing, there's an understanding, and nothing gets done. So what happens if Trump actually fires all these people? He's got a giant constituency of his enemies that have now got free time on their hands.
Yeah, I mean, when he got in the first time, he was going to drain the swamp, wasn't he? And all he really managed to do was he got rid of Comey at the FBI. He did do that, but a great sort of political capital just to do that.
Which he could have done on day one.
Right.
There's nothing actually.
So how much will he be able to do? Assuming, let's say, he wins in November. How much, with the best will in the world, will he be able to do? I don't know. I hope that even if he does a fraction of what he said there, it's going to be, a million times better than, just letting the Democrats keep destroying America and the Western civilization. I thought we'd drill down into, because it does look like, the whole point of this segment is that it does look like, assuming he doesn't end up in jail, that he will be the 47th president, because he's going to win the Republican nomination, right? At Iowa, he got 51%. He's already got 20 delegates. DeSantis came second. There's nowhere really, 21%. So he's almost certainly, for me, going to win that nomination.
He probably will. There are a few states where it looks suspect. And that's because, Nikki Haley got 8 delegates in Iowa, but that's because Iowa, you have to have registered as a Republican in order to vote in the Republican primary. A bunch of the states have open primaries, which means Democrats and independents can just show up and vote for her. And like Reid Hoffman, who's the guy that bankrolled the E. Jean Carroll case, which was the definitely true rape defamation case that Trump was found guilty of not raping, but guilty of defamation for saying he wasn't raping. He's been supporting Haley and bankrolling her campaign, has been encouraging Democrats to go and vote for Haley. And so it looks like that there might be some states where the vote is fudged in Haley's direction as a establishment adjacent opposition candidate to Trump. So it's not like super secure. She's polling really high in New Hampshire, for example. It's really strange. So it's likely Trump will win, but it's not as guaranteed as people first thought.
Should we talk about?
I'd put all my money on it that he'll win it, because you just look at the past, how it goes. Anyone that wins that highly in Iowa has never failed to secure the vote. We'll see, but that's domination, really.
Well, they haven't fortified it to the same extent, though. Sorry.
If you go look at the bookies, I mean, you're right.
I'd bet my mortgage on it.
Should we talk about? I mentioned before. I don't know if you want to, but Tucker Carlson has a theory about this that leads into what Connor's saying.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So Tucker Carlson's theory, he did a video where he was talking about the fact that that state you're talking about, I forget the name.
New Hampshire or Iowa? Or?
New Hampshire. They're spending Nikki Haley's campaign $1 million a week in Facebook advertisements.
Yeah.
And they got footage of people who turned up to some of her events. And they literally said, yeah, I'm a registered Democrat, but I don't like Joe Biden. I think he's ineffective. So I'm going to vote for Nikki Haley in the Republican primary. I was like, what the hell are you doing here? So there's this plot that seems to be true, at least in Tucker Carlson's eyes, which is that you let this play out. Trump obviously is the one who is going to get selected, but then he gets imprisoned or deselected or whatever. And then Nikki Haley is the de facto winner because she's number 2. And that's the plot to try and rig the entire thing.
I did say, assuming he's not in prison, assuming that gambit by his enemies.
He can run from prison, but as long as he's still the RNC nominee. If the RNC pulls some chicanery...
I thought it was if you're a convicted felon, you just simply cannot be president. Is that not the case? If you're clinically insane or a felon, I think you're not allowed
Hasn't
I
stopped Joe
think
Biden.
that's
Yeah,
the
I'm
thing.
not bringing any of this
But-
up to say I know
right,
anything.
okay.
I'm just saying that's
But,
a
you know,
theory that's out there.
Even if Nikki Haley does well in New Hampshire, in the rest of the country, in all sorts of places, Trump's got it sewn up.
As a correction, I think you're right that you can't run as a felon, but if you win the election and then you are imprisoned, but you're technically the president incumbent, you can pardon yourself from prison. I think that's
Really?
I think that is how it works. Yeah, because I was listening to some constitutional lawyer a little while
You
ago.
wouldn't need to pardon us because the president has got immunity, just full immunity. Well, anyway, the Senate could then impeach you, and then
Exactly,
you can be
yeah.
tried in the Senate. But anyway, we'll see what happens. I mean, it seems to me, like I say, I'd bet my mortgage on it that Trump gets the nomination. Now, whether he wins in November is something else. Because even though again the polling looks good for him, because Biden seems to be so unpopular, you just don't know again what shenanigans or chicanery or what fortifications might happen in November. But still, again, assuming he's not in prison, I would have thought if you could take that out of the equation, I see him being the 47th president of the United States.
Well, as we discussed, I believe it was last week, there are a lot of Democrat states that are trying to pack their populations with illegals to try and move the electoral college votes more in their favor. And then at the border states, there are also, with the local state legislature having flipped slightly blue in places like Arizona, they're now allowing illegals, because you don't have to prove your citizenship, to not vote in local elections, but you can vote in only the federal election. So there will be quite a few maybe illegal aliens that try to vote, and they're trying to make it so that the Democrats have bigger say in the electoral college, because obviously the popular vote doesn't matter. Now, whether or not that means the same effect as 2020 with mail-in ballots, who knows? Doesn't mean they're not trying. I'm saying all of this again, hoping that Trump wins, obviously.
Yeah. And of course, there is, I've kept saying, haven't I, that assuming he's not in prison, that is a big assumption. Because as the fake news, as the sort of corporate media woke news always says, he's on, is it 90 odd charges he's in various places for various things he's up against. So that's not nothing. And of course, the justice system has been weaponized. That is also true, and is partisan against him, certainly in New York. And then there's the question of him being deselected in various states. What is it? Colorado did it, and somewhere else was
Maine.
Maine, and I think some of the other
They're considering
other
it.
states are considering.
California has considered it. Not
Right.
that that's going to be a swing state anyway.
It's-
He's got a Supreme Court case coming up
That's what
very soon.
That's what I'm going to get to. So the Supreme Court are going to have to make a judgment on that, it seems. From what I have read and seen, it looks like they'll probably do it quite quickly, sooner rather than later, which is good. I suspect, I wouldn't bet my mortgage on it, but I think the odds are that they would strike it down, because there's more conservatives with a small c on the Supreme Court than not. So let's hope they'll strike it down. I mean, because their rationale is that he's sort of guilty of like fomenting an insurrection, which he's just not. He's obviously not, right? I mean, he said on that day a number of times, don't go and do anything crazy at the Capitol.
Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Then he released videos subsequently
it's a matter
when
of
the guided tour happened, that you should go home in peace and love.
It's a matter of record. Right. Okay. And so his lawyers are arguing that even the 14th Amendment, which is the thing that says about insurrection, doesn't even give a definition of exactly what they mean by insurrection. So all that stuff is shaky. The fact that the state Supreme Court in Colorado went with that is so partisan, so nakedly partisan, isn't it?
Have you read the document that tries to let them justify kicking him off the ballot? Because they don't actually appeal to legal precedent. They appeal to various Merriam-Webster dictionary definitions of the word insurrection. It's farcical. It's just, but so this is a question.
So you'd expect the Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, to strike them down, say that was wrong.
Sure, but if this is all the pretext of them getting what they want anyway, I don't have the answer to this, but let's say the Supreme Court, federal Supreme Court, say, no, you have to keep him on the ballot because he's not guilty of this. He hasn't been found guilty by Congress or a trial. And then the states go, no. what happens?
But the states refuse to abide by the
Supreme Court ruling.
Court. I don't know if they can they?
Well,
They can just break the law.
yeah, exactly.
Suppose.
Genuinely, how do you have a
Spoke to,
country?
I spoke to a friend recently because you see all that drama that's going down in Poland, and I was like, I don't really understand what's going on. So I messaged my friend, and he says, "Yeah, no, it's actually mental. What's happened is that they've got this new prime minister, and he's just decided that all of the judges that were appointed by the previous government are now invalid because he just doesn't like them. He obviously says, oh, it's because of the procedure in which they were put in bollocks. Just doesn't care. So he's now passing stuff that has been struck down by the courts, but he just doesn't care. That just goes ahead anyway. The police comply with it, for example. The government comply with it. And even the president has declared some of the stuff he's doing illegal, and he's just ignored. So, I mean, genuinely, the country can just break down immediately.
Yeah, there are, thinking about it now, there are examples in history of when, I think the Supreme Court told Andrew Jackson that he couldn't do a few things. He couldn't just do death marches of Native Americans.
The Trail of Tears.
And he just did it anyway.
He was like, watch this.
I think Jefferson once or twice was told he couldn't do something or other, and he just did it anyway. So, okay, all right, it's possible. But that would really be sort of a wound in the Republic, wouldn't it? If the Supreme Court said to Colorado, you can't do this, and Colorado just did it anyway, that would be, you're looking at
Colorado's
really,
like states' rights.
you're really looking. You're very close to some sort of Civil War type thing going on.
But the Democrats have been gearing that up for ages because in their rhetoric, I mean, Biden gave the speech with the glowing red background from the bowels of hell and said the MAGA Republicans are threatening our democracy. That's the repeated. So they've already marginalized the opposition as being outside the bounds of normal political discourse. So if they say we don't recognize a decision which keeps the candidate on the ballot that is overturning the democratic process itself, no, we feel entitled to just ignore that. They've got the zeal to do it. Most of this legal stuff is just the pretext for what they already want anyway. So I wouldn't be shocked if it happened. That's why I don't want to make a prediction because we're beyond the bounds of normalcy. So.
That's true. Yeah, we are through the looking glass.
Even if the election goes ahead, right? Though, but who's gonna accept it either? But the Democrats are going to throw a fit if Trump wins legitimately as well.
Right. Yeah. Both sides are sure to contest whatever happens.
Yeah.
Aren't they? Yeah. It's quite worrying. I mean, one other thing I would say is that I think probably most of our audience are going to agree with what I'm about to say, but it does seem that it is just purely partisan politics that he's up against so many criminal charges. It just seems so transparent. I can't believe that sort of the mainstream corporate media. I saw run with the story that he's just an arch criminal in some way. There was a documentary on the TV, British TV, just a night or two ago. It was obviously an anti-Trump angle, just saying that it's unbelievable that he's not already in prison and stuff. The propaganda, the anti-Trump propaganda, is fully unhinged.
It's not just partisan, though, as we've seen, as we were talking about Nikki Haley. It's just establishment. What they want is to ensure that the election is always a Hobson's choice between one candidate who favors the lobbyists and another candidate who favors the lobbyists even harder. And so there are plenty of Republicans who don't want Republicans in name only, who don't want Trump to be the nominee, despite him being the most popular in the party, despite him having the most votes of an incumbent president in history. So
it does seem to me, the reason why I played that clip earlier, and it is months old, that clip, it's not fresh, is that often people, when you talk about JFK, for example, or even his younger brother, Bobby, like, why were they killed? Why were they murdered? Why were they such a threat? Who were they such a threat to that they needed to die? Well, that clip where he's talking about, I'm going to dismantle the power of the deep state, stroke the intelligence services. I'm going to make sure that FISA courts can't just spy on anyone they want endlessly, and on and on and on. I mean, that's why he faces such sort of vehement opposition from all sorts of angles. It seems to me, I mean, I'm not really sort of going out on a limb there. Seems fairly obvious that that's what's going on.
Well, Tucker asked him, do you think you could be assassinated? So
yeah, what did he say? I vaguely remember that. That was a few months ago now, wasn't it? What did Trump say to that?
I can't remember his exact response.
Didn't he sort of fairly essentially laugh it off? Or not laugh it off, but he was like, well, I don't know.
And then Vivek has since been saying to like Alex Jones and the like that I'm in the race to be the safety net in case Trump either gets taken out or quite literally, decides to take a drive near the grassy knoll.
Yeah. I
Speaking
mean,
of, should we talk about VPs?
Can do.
Because to be honest, I don't care about anyone else except Tucker Carlson being VP.
Tucker won't do it though. He's already said.
Maybe not, but I just look at everyone else. I'm like, I don't care, because your point is entirely right. That's what you want, is someone who would just go even harder. And everyone had this. You remember with Mike Pence, where everyone was like, "Oh, he chose a great VP because if they take down Trump, Mike Pence is even more extreme." And it's like, no, it was bollocks. It was utter bollocks. Who had ever even heard of him before as well? Just came out of nowhere. So now it's actually more serious that he picked someone good. And, well, who is there?
the thing about vice president is that obviously if the president themselves, for whatever reason, are no longer breathing, then, you're one heartbeat away from the presidency. Okay. Other than that, it's sort of a terrible position to be in.
It's a ceremonial role at best.
Yeah, you're one heartbeat away from the big chair. But other than that, you've got very, very little power. I mean, you preside over the Senate and various administrative things, but you don't really get to set policy very much. You might be in the room, but you're on some level a joke.
It provides momentum for your own presidential run later down the line.
There's that. I mean, even John Adams, the first VP ever, went on to be president. He said it was a terrible position to be in, being vice president of the United States, because in all sorts of ways you're sort of actively excluded from decision making. But yeah, it's where it sets yourself up. I don't know who Trump will pick.
There's been some talk.
I hope it's not DeSantis or
No, it won't be
Nikki
DeSantis.
Haley or that Vivek fella.
Well,
I hope it's none of them.
It's possible to be Vivek. One of the names has been floated for a while. Apparently, Trump has already chosen it ages ago. One of the names that's been floated is Kristi Noem, who's governor of, I think it's North Carolina. She's put her foot in it recently. It's because she was quite good on COVID. People were saying Carrie Lake, but Carrie Lake's running for senator of Arizona, so she's not going to do that. And then people have since been saying Vivek. When at the event at Iowa, when Vivek dropped out of the race and said, "I'm throwing my weight behind Trump," he hugged Trump and people were chanting VP. And Trump said instantly afterwards, "What a great guy. He's going to be working with us for a long time." And that probably means a cabinet appointment. Again, if Trump's already picked it. But it's not like he's out of the running.
I would love to see Tucker as VP, but as you say, I think he's sort of fairly categorically ruled it out. Although I did see him not that long ago, a few months ago, sort of and sit on the fence a little bit on that question. Kind of said no, but didn't explicitly 100% ruled it out.
He did say he didn't think he'd be very good at it because he's a media man. That's why.
Right. Which isn't saying, it's not looking the interviewer in the eye and saying no. Yeah. It's a hard no from me. He didn't do that, did he? But it would be cool with Trump as president and Tucker as his VP.
Because that's the flip side of my mind. It's the worst job in the world if you want to do something, but if you just want to get your message out there, free salary.
I think he'd be great at it, but
you get a massive signal boost. Your profile's ranged, and frankly, people kind of want Tucker to be president one day anyway. So, like, what's the downside? I don't even get the downside for Tucker. Like, sure, you lose some money in running your own business, but
you can't change the narrative from outside the tent because at the moment he's got probably the biggest far bigger mainstream media.
Saying that, does he need to do anything? Like, if he became vice president tomorrow, he doesn't have to be in Washington for anything. Couldn't he just sit in his bedroom and carry on making the videos?
Well, you would have to be in Washington for briefings and things like that. He could still probably do his show once a week.
I think you could just do a Zoom call.
The vice president is they have got various ceremonial obligations. They're not the chairman, but they oversee the Senate. The person with the gavel at the front of the Senate, that's the VP. So they do have all sorts of things they have to do in DC. But I think you're right, though, still. The majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, he could still sit at home doing streaming stuff.
Yeah,
if he wanted to.
Just move to Washington, do it. Go do it in Tim Pool's studio.
Right, yeah.
So. If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Symposium series, this episode on pseudoscience. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter.